The Brian John Show.
Did I tell you my McKinsey story or no?
No, I've never heard
Are you
it.
happy where you are, Brian?
Everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Brian Show. Today, I actually have probably the most experienced career-wise person around me. I would consider him one of my mentors. Yeon, I call him Hyung just because he's my older brother. Not my real older brother, but an older brother figure. Yeon, thanks for spending the time to come. I know that you're a busy man. Most of the people that I actually have planned for this show are like my age people, just struggling to make a career for themselves. Yeon has made a very great career for himself. But today I want to just have a casual conversation and pick his brain about what's going on. But yeah, thanks for coming.
It's a privilege. I don't know if you're struggling with your career, Brian. I think you have a wonderful career right now and ahead. So
I actually let's start there. I think a lot of people think that I'm like balling out and like doing very well. I will be very blunt and say I'm not doing poorly, and I think like I'm doing objectively. This is gonna make me sound like such a douche, but I think I'm doing better than a lot of my peers. But at the same time, like I think people's version of who I am is very inflated in their mind. I want to make that very clear.
I think isn't that good though? It's like you brand yourself and market self very well. So I
Do
think
you
it's important.
that's actually, let's start there. Do you think that's good? I feel like we're living in this world where like marketing and branding matters a lot. I agree with that. And I think I'm the type of person where I set a expectation for myself and I tell others I'm a certain way. And even if I'm actually not there, I try to get myself to become there, which I think is a good way of motivation. But at the same time, it's like very toxic. It's in essence, people think I am someone that I may be not. That's scary.
Um, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to inflate your brand and marketing to an extent where you are easily identified as a phony
Yes.
after a couple of conversations or working together.
Yes.
But in today's world, I believe it's important to market yourself, whether it's within your friend network or at work. You want to be known for something and you
Hmm.
want to have that trait
Hmm.
so that there's the initial pull, right? It's kind of like digital marketing in a way. You need
Hmm.
to get your name out there,
Hmm.
you need to build awareness. I
Hmm.
think it's same for your own individual as a career.
Hmm.
And when you write resumes, I think one thing that I always advise candidates is what is that pop in your resume?
Hmm.
So um, your education and all that, I think when you apply for the jobs that you want, it's going to be similar. There are going to be 1,000 others like you with similar educational background, similar qualifications. So at that point, you are competing for something extra,
Sure.
like a fit, um, like your personality, like your work style, or your views, how you structure problems, things like that,
Hmm.
which aren't necessarily coming up on your resume. So,
Right.
but yeah,
I mean, on
I
that
think
front,
marketing.
do you think like something that I'm always fascinated by your story is you had probably one of the most untraditional like career trajectories in my opinion. So just to like give a brief overview for people that are listening slash watching. So Jan, you graduated from UMich. You have a PhD, right? And it's for a STEM background. I think for aeronautical engineering, right? Um, but actually, let's start there. What made you get into that? That's not something that someone just does casually. No one decides to get a
Yeah,
PhD in
casual
aero.
thing. I like airplanes, so I moved around a lot when I was young.
Hmm.
And I think my first airplane trip was when I was like 1 year old, and I loved just that airplane flying experience,
Hmm.
and I still do. And that, I guess, enthusiasm and curiosity of how this thing flies just never escaped my mind, right? So when I went to college, I applied to UMich specifically because of the aerospace engineering program. And I did my undergrad. I still felt like I need to learn a little bit more. I want to learn more about aerodynamics, how you design things. And so I pursued a PhD program there. And then yeah, that's how I actually got into aerospace. It wasn't I actually didn't think about the job opportunity and all that. I was quite naive. It was more about, I really want to study this. And hey, the school's paying me to learn this thing, so why not? So,
Oh.
and then I ended up spending 8 years in that area.
Do you think there was something? Now we're getting into a deeper hole, but I reflect on my life. I think about myself when I was applying for college. I was not thinking about, oh, like I like this and I want to study this. I've never in my life actually been someone to be like, I'm actually interested in what I'm about to study. I always tell people on my channel, and this also is going to sound very douchey, but I chose accounting because accounting was easy for me. I chose accounting because it was the path of least resistance, and I knew that I could do very well with very minimal studying. And I knew that very early on because I took my first accounting class, and I actually talked about this on the last episode of this, but um, took my first class. People were studying hours and they could do well. And I remember studying for my first test for 30 minutes and I got the highest grade in the class. And I instantly realized, oh, this is not some rocket science and it's something that comes naturally to me. And I chose accounting purely because I knew that it would give me a very easy college career, which it did. Um, how at 18, 19 did you realize I want to study this? Like, where did that come? Were you always like that as a kid?
I was. I
Huh.
always wanted to learn how you design airplanes, and my dream was to go work for a company that designs airplanes and aircrafts and whatnot. Right, and
Hmm.
I still might have still in me. I think that dream got kind of crushed when I was exploring jobs after PhD and realized that in the US, you need a US citizenship to be able to really apply for anything high tech related. Like
Hmm.
SpaceX doesn't accept non-US citizens even today.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think maybe it's unique, but also it could be your environment and parents as well. So my parents never pushed me to pursue a path in a certain way. My dad did nudge me a little bit to say, hey, why don't you do something related to computer engineering, computer science? Like
Hmm.
that's where the future is headed. And he wasn't wrong. And I took a couple computer science courses in my undergrad,
Hmm.
but ultimately I said the skill set that aerospace harnesses is cross-functional. So it's a combination of controls like computer science, electrical engineering, structural like engineering. And that's what I liked about it. I'm taking the learnings from different disciplines
Oh.
and then I'm creating something that works. Whereas um, and I think a lot of the other majors are becoming like that, right? I think like biomedical field is something that's new that didn't exist before, and I think a lot of the other disciplines are also being more cross-functional in nature. But to answer your question, I always had passion for aircraft, so it was
Hmm.
actually an easy decision for me. All the schools that I applied for all aerospace programs, so I applied to Michigan, Penn State, Georgia Tech,
Wow.
Caltech. Yeah.
And that's to be a little corny for a second. I said this also in my last episode. I want this series to serve as not a role model per se, but a thinking model for students because most of my audience is very young. They're either high school or college at most, and I think a lot of them probably has and will take my approach of college applications and career applications where it's not very thoughtful driven. I don't really expect 17-year-olds to think like, what am I actually going to do with my life? But at the same time, I remember when I was applying for college, I was just hitting, top 20 universities, best programs, applying to a different program for every school. So I would apply to, journalism here, science here, comp sci here, econ here, which is honestly the wrong approach because frankly, I didn't become any of those things. I just think it's hard because I would argue, not to make you sound weird, but I would say you're an anomaly. I think it's very hard for people to think like I want to build airplanes, therefore I'm going to do blank when they're so young. I think there's people that are interested in things, but turning that into a college application is no one's thinking that in adolescence, at least not around me.
You could be right. You could be right. I think it also just depends on different majors. I do think though, some people are very clear on what they want. For example,
Mm,
a lot of the pre-med students that I met, like they
mm,
were pretty clear they wanted to do something in biomedical field. Some people are, you know, pushed to become doctors and they want to become doctors. Some people want to know that they want to be lawyers. And who knows? Maybe, I mean, I know a couple people who did 4 years of med school and then decided that they want to do something else, right? They may figure out later. But there will be people who will know what they want at that stage in life, but it may not be the one that they carry forever. So, like for example, I did all the way to PhD in aerospace, but I did work for Korean government for 3 years designing like missiles and whatnot. But after that, my career has nothing to do with aerospace engineering.
Right. Which I think I like classifying people. I like putting people in boxes, and I think largely
is it classifying or judging?
Exactly. I love judging people, and I love putting people in two separate boxes of people that won't, on a simplified note, people that won't be good at anything that they try, and people that would be great at anything they try. And I think you're a prime example of it. It's not really a matter of what you're doing. It's just whatever you're doing, you're gonna push it till the end. And I think I saw it on a Korean like audition program where this guy came out. He wasn't the best looking person. He wasn't the greatest at rapping. I think rapping was his main thing. And the producer was like, it was Psy, the producer was Psy from Gangnam Style. And he looked at the guy and was like, when I first auditioned, my entertainment company CEO told me, I'm not sure if you're going to be the best singer or the best rapper, but I think you'll become something. And that's what matters. And the guy that he auditioned actually became one of the main members for a group called Winner in YG, which is also a pretty big group. But I think that's what really matters. I think it's more about the essence of like, are you someone that can carry anything that you're given? And speaking on that, actually, to transfer over to your previous role and then your current role now, briefly, do you think that so post PhD? What caused you to realize I don't really want to build airplanes anymore, or not as much as I thought I would? You said the whole citizenship thing.
Yeah, so I was applying for jobs in aerospace companies, like because I wanted to work in the US. And the major aerospace engineering it's considered high tech, right? And so the best place to exercise that knowledge is probably countries like UK and the US, where they actually are at the top of the chain. So the companies that I applied were like Northrop Grumman, Raytheon,
Of course,
Boeing, even like NASA research centers. SpaceX was aggressively hiring at that time too. And there are a bunch of others like Ball Aerospace and Sikorsky, which makes helicopters. All of them, though, required US residency as a minimum requirement and preferred as a US citizen, which I had neither, by the way. So I got turned down. Like I didn't even get interviews to interview for a lot of those things. And so that's when I decided, well, I haven't really thought about my career. I only pursued on academic front something that I wanted to do, which was great. But now I'm hitting the wall of what I'm going to do for a living. Right. So that's when I realized, I think there's the way I look at it is there's definitely something that you like. There's something that you're good at. You mentioned that you did accounting because it's easy for you. I think it's important to think about what you're good at, what do you like to do? And another dimension is like, can you make a decent or living out of it that's up to your standards? And I say it's really hard to find a career path or a job out there that will. Hold on, what's going on? This building management. Please be advised that the fire alarm activations will commence in 15 minutes for our annual fire drill. There is no need to evacuate. This is an operational fire. Now, why can't they let me know ahead of time? This is building management. Please be advised the fire alarm activations will commence in 15 minutes.
Wait, so I can't wait. Is there a fire alarm?
They didn't give me a heads up that they had a fire drill going on. So I'll just mute and then like cut my video when alarm goes.
No, that's fine. I can edit. But yeah, no, keep going. You're on a spree.
What was I saying?
So like it's hard to find out. Yeah.
Three things. Yeah. So what do you like? What you're good at? And can it support the living or lifestyle that you want? The third bucket is actually all dependent on you. Right. So it really depends on what your financial and life goal is. And then it kind of bleeds into the other two, what you're good at and what you like. I guess I didn't really care about that lifestyle dimension when I was studying, right? So I just did what I'm good at, what I like, and then you do that for, until you get your PhD. And then now I have to make a living out of it. And then the job that I'm looking for doesn't support that. So that's when I had to hustle myself I literally went into Ross Business School, the building itself, and I started just meeting people in the business school because they were very friendly people, right? Like they were very outgoing. And then there were a bunch of kids just sitting out in the atrium, studying or socializing. And then I started to make friends there. And then I asked about, what kind of jobs they're looking at, how do you prepare for? So I had to relearn all the networking, how do you write your resume? And then I went into a lot of these like MBA info sessions, even though I didn't have MBA, I just went in. Right? Then I had my resume ready and I dropped my resume. I got a couple interviews that way.
Wow.
And then me and my friend, so I had another friend who was also looking for a job and in non-engineering field. And so we were coming off of Ross Business School. We were at CC Little and it was super sunny and there was no cover, so sweating. And I saw this banner across the street saying like McKinsey Company info session for advanced professional degree. That's what they call it, non-MBAs. And this was 2010. So
Wow.
It's almost like 12 years ago. And we said, hey, I don't know when the bus is going to come, but like it's too hot out. Why don't we just go there because they'll have free food and free drinks. Like just go. This is right across the street. So I just went in there. And the good thing is I had my resume and everything because we were just coming off of resume drop. So let's just go in there. I don't even know what this company is. So we sat down and we listened to them and there were a bunch of like consultants in front. I'm like, and after the info session, I still felt like, I don't know what this company does, but it seems pretty cool. Like they say they have huge impact on Fortune 500 company and things are flexible and you get to travel around the world. That sounds pretty amazing. So I dropped my resume and then I got a call back to take like a 45-minute test at Detroit office. So I took that test. I guess I passed. And then they invited me for first round interviews. And then they also sent out a list of all the people from Michigan who were invited to first round interviews so we can pair up and practice cases and whatnot. So, and then that's actually how I got into McKinsey. It wasn't planned at all. And my initial plan from Ross Business School was more on the banking side. So applying to like Goldman. I think back in the day, I don't think it was BOA. I think it was still Merrill Lynch.
Yeah.
And then like there were a bunch of other corporate strategy jobs, some in automotive, some in the chemical industry. And then I also applied for Bloomberg. Back in the day, I used to know how to code a little bit. That's what I did for my thesis. So I applied for a lot of coding jobs as well. So it was kind of a scattered approach, a little bit panicking, like, what do I do? But I guess my natural skill set and problem solving maybe led to McKinsey. And I have to thank McKinsey for accepting my application because in 2010, Bain and BCG actually didn't recruit non-MBAs, right? So they had a pretty hard cutoff to say you have to be an MBA to apply, but McKinsey did open up recruiting for non-MBAs.
Wow.
But even on the non-MBA poll, I think it was only 8 or 9 candidates that were invited to like the first round at that time. So there weren't a whole lot. And by the way, I still keep in touch with all those 8, I think, that we used to practice cases together. Yeah. Wow. It's a fun story. They're no longer with McKinsey anymore, but I think they're doing something in New York, all of them.
Of course they are. As you were starting this like recruitment and you said you were doing like banking, coding and all this stuff, which obviously are top of the line jobs, did you not have any feeling of, I don't want to call it regret, but thinking back like, damn, I did this PhD in this renowned genius field that not everyone can do, and now I'm just going for a corporate job. That you didn't feel like you were wasting the PhD experience?
A little bit, but I think I knew that going in because my dad told me that already, right? He said, you need to do computer science or something else to make your life easier in terms of getting a job and making a living for yourself.
Mm,
I think people know there are jobs already. We know that if you have a kid right now, I think you will tell if your kid wants to become, let's say, I don't know, some profession that's been here for a long time. I think everyone at their top professions makes really good living. It's just a matter about the average, right?
right.
So, like average architect, for example, I actually want to be an architect too. Um, and then, or it could be a lot of like average retail store manager, right? Like I think they've been around for a long time. Like, you could be good at it, but for an average person working in that profession would make probably less than, let's say, software engineer today.
Right.
So I kind of knew that going in. Like aerospace engineering wasn't the high paid profession. And even if you look at the postgraduate salary, which I think a lot of the career centers publish, aerospace engineering is not nowhere near the top. Like top paying was like industrial operation engineering, electrical engineering, computer science. It was all that high tech, and the civil engineer, nuclear engineer, aerospace engineer were like all at the bottom. So I kind of knew that going in. I don't think it's a waste. It's a knowledge that I wanted to pursue, and I learned it. So I achieved that goal, and who knows, maybe I'll use this knowledge sometime down the road. It's not something that you forget and go away. And I actually use a lot of the skill sets that I developed during my PhD time into jobs at like even McKinsey, Google, and that's things like, and I think a lot of grad students are able to do this very well, and that's probably why a lot of consulting are hiring non-MBAs is, process of writing your thesis and making the case and then defending it is very much like taking an ambiguous problem, put a structure around it, support it with data and facts, and then you defend your hypothesis or your argument for it, which is a very basic for anything. Even like even if you think about like VC pitching, like that thought process has to be there too. So I think that skill set, I use it the most. And then I did a lot on experimentation and also data analytics. So I have some knowledge on how analytics work, how codings work, and what are different numerical schemes that are used to derive certain results, and what's the implication, statistics. I think I use a lot of that in my jobs too. So it's not completely lost. Right? I think the only thing that I'm not using is the specific aerospace knowledge. Like
Sure.
Navier-Stokes equations and all that fun equation nerdy stuff.
In that way, though, and I think this is something that is your competitive edge of having this knowledge and having the experience. Do you look at today's generation of youngins, including me, where we're so quick to jump to the next thing or be tired out by what we have now? Where do you think we're like almost on a house of cards where the people that stick it through with things like banking or consulting will ultimately come out on top? Because I think that there's a snowball effect of sticking through things and finishing the PhD and staying long in consulting that allows you to scale your skill set. But I think a lot of people around me, myself included, are going from one job to the next. And I think job hopping is a genuine symptom, or I don't want to call it a disease, but it's something that we've been doing. Are you worried about that as a manager / someone looking down? No.
I need to give them feedback about this. Please be advised that the fire alarm activation will commence in 5 minutes for our annual fire. There's no need to evacuate. This is an operational team fire. To answer your question, let me think. I think it's a fact that with globalization and how, I guess, the market evaluates companies is forcing some of this too, in a way that
Mm.
a lot of the stock market in general is evaluating companies on a quarterly basis. Right? And it used to be that if you look at how the successful companies were evaluated, how the successful leaders in the past have been advocating in terms of how to build a good business, right? Like CEO of GE, like Welch, right, or even like Warren Buffett.
Sure.
Invest a lot of investment that goes into that management, the people aspect of it, and then having a long-term view and the strategy and commitment to actually build a business. That still exists, but in a very different and narrow scale today. That's how I see it. And there's a lot of companies that are growing in an unprecedented level that we've seen. And I think the market is also more fluid in a way, like money moves around a lot more easily than before. And because a lot more people also has access to stock market, people are finding other avenues for more niche and high-term growth, right? So it could be like private equity funds or VC funds and all that. So I think your generation definitely has a lot more opportunity than my generation or generation before. And I haven't seen the data, but I'm pretty sure the amount of VC funds available to any investor has increased very much compared to 10 years or even 20 years ago. And so the market supports that dynamic. And if you know what you're worth, and again, if you can market yourself and live up to that promise of what you can deliver, I don't see any problem you or anyone job hopping from one place to another. It's a fair game, right? Like you're talented, you bring something to the table, you're known for it. Why not get that fair share of what your value is in the market and get what you want? As an individual, though, it can get also tiring if you move the job every 2 years, right? It's a new management, new project, maybe new city, I don't know. As long as you are able to cope with that, I think it's fine. But I think for most people, if you went 3 jobs in the last 5 years, I would say that's not an easy task. Like starting something new, getting ramped up, and doing something, leaving. I mean, I moved 9 different countries in my life. I spent like a year there, 2 years there, 3 years there, and I'm used to it now.
Sure.
Not easy at first when you make those transitions.
So you think it's more of a personal strain thing? No, I think that makes sense. I think maybe this is a personal concern, but I just see a lot of people that I think, especially in the beginning of their career, like what market value do you really have aside from what you're born with? And I think I've seen a lot of my peers, especially the people slightly under me that started their career during COVID, where they didn't have proper training, where they never had a corporate identity, they never learned from a mentor. And it seems like they're just looking for their next big thing. And maybe in the short run, it's going to work because the market is a employee market right now. And kids under me are making far bigger than what their parents could have made at their age because companies are being competitive. I think the market dynamic makes sense, but my only fear is that there's a big portion of my generation that has no concrete skills, zero professional experience, and they just jump from one thing to the next without fully forming anything at any point. And I'm scared that's going to come crumbling down when those people are turning into their 30s and they're supposed to be managers, but they have no long-term experience anywhere.
Got it. All right. Ladies and gentlemen,
Such a San Francisco thing.
Okay, it's done. Well, I guess, what do you define as a concrete skills, right? I think there are um, there are some like fundamental skills that you can learn from any job, and there's very technical skills. You're right that job hopping around jobs may not be developing that technical skills. You need to be in that field to be able to see what's the latest, all that. So for example, if you're a software engineer, I don't know, 10 years ago and haven't practiced it and want to come into the market right now, I think you can bring in the thinking, all that, but you may struggle to actually write the script or the code that you need because the language may have changed or got optimized, or how people code have changed along the way. But I actually don't have a whole lot of technical skills to say, right? I think the job, the value that I bring to the table has always been more around taking an ambiguous problem, break it down into pieces where you can communicate and digest and set some course of action. You communicate to the broader group, rally people around it, and get stuff going. There's more on the problem-solving skill set, plus the influencing, plus the execution element of it that is requested by the business management. And that's the skill set that I bring. So there's a lot of soft skill involved. There's a lot of experience involved. And I'm glad that I had that experience through consulting, and also even in the Army days, right? I was designing, experimenting, sourcing to testing. Have seen that for one product over 3 years also gave me a lot of perspectives on how to work with different people and how to push projects, how to manage projects as well. So I will just think about, again, like what you're passionate about, what you like to do. And if that's on the area of very technical, then go for it. But if there's a lot of jobs out there that requires you to interact with a lot of people. And there's a lot of jobs out there that does not rely on heavy technical skill set. And I mean, you've been in investment banking, there are some technical skill that needs to into how do you project, revenue, and how do you actually construct a lot of these models. But deal making is not always done on paper, right?
No.
Like you also have to know the parties, you have to know the nuances of what people are saying and wanting. There's a legal aspect to it, there's timing aspect to it. There's a lot of moving pieces that just you can't be captured on a piece of paper or a piece of Excel sheet or whatever you use to build a model. So there will always be that human element. And it really depends. I don't think you staying long in one company will necessarily develop all the skill set that you need. Hopping around may actually be better. Like, for example, I'm very adaptive to my environment just because I lived and hopped around so many countries in my life. It's a good thing. The bad thing is that I may not have childhood friends because I moved around so much and Facebook didn't exist in the back days. So like, it's really hard to keep up with the contact, right? So there's pros and cons. And I think the job is the same way. Like if you only stay 1 or 2 years at certain jobs, you will have hard time building that professional network in that company for long. But I'm pretty sure you'll be better at adapting and forming new relationships in a new environment. So I think it really depends on what company it looks for. Right now, I think more companies are being formed than ever before. So it might be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the startup industry is definitely, you touched on the VC front, and I didn't mean to like fish for comfort, but I think you gave me what I almost wanted to hear. I frankly think it's always hard, right? Because especially people my age, hard skills are more tangible. You could put on a paper that you know how to, code in Python, or you know how to use SQL or whatever. Saying on a resume, I know how to rally people. Like it's not something that like you can really say without, to your point, experience. And I think once that experience stacks, you could say, hey, like I built a 6-person company I was the fourth person hire, and it's now $100 million business. Like that I think speaks volumes. But I think the issue is you see a lot of people who do like a year in banking, couldn't make it. Then they jump to another thing, jump to another thing. And at every point, they didn't really gain enough experience because just when they're about to be fully onboarded, they go to the next opportunity for incremental income that really means nothing in the long run.
Hmm.
That's the fear. Because I'm a firm believer that growth is not necessarily linear. Like it's not a linear slope. I think it's very you build it for a long time and then it hits and it just takes off.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't think you could have the takeoff if you continuously pivot on what you're doing.
I think the probability might be lower,
Hmm.
but it's not zero, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, for every one successful startup story you hear, there's probably 99 or 999 others that have failed, right? Um, but I think that's the kind of the human nature, that when you start a company, you
Hmm.
never associate yourself with the 999. You always associate yourself with the one, right? And I think that's also what keeps the morale going, and that's what keeps going at the beginning of the startup stage. But I think some of these experiences as failures, you could also package them as learnings, right? So for example, I never joined a startup before, so I never know what it means to be a part of 5 people startup that is, trying to scale the business or make the product go to market work or get these. I don't know anything about that field. Right? And whereas, you might have that skill set. So there are, as I said, there is a supply and demand in job market. And if the market is more on the tenured business management, side of things, then maybe I'm a better fit. But if the market is looking for someone who has done some scrappy things and are willing to just get stuff done and have that grit, I may not be the best candidate because I just don't have experience in that. So you're right to have that fear, but maybe the fear is coming because you're comparing apples and oranges, right? I think there are, like, you're in a startup world right now and you're thinking about all your fellows and people who are on that traditional
Correct.
conventional path, right?
Correct.
And it's both ways. It's not easy for you to jump from this startup world into that world, but
Right.
vice versa. It's not like I can jump into the VC and startup world right away. I don't
Hmm.
think so. Maybe Series C, Series D, when they need help to scale their business
Right.
and have that value, and imminent for IPO, you need a clear story and get the company together into one. But I honestly don't think that I'll be a good fit for pre-seed angel or like even Series A, because I have no experience on how to bring a product or something into life. Right?
Hmm. Damn. I think the fear, I don't even want to call it fear. I'm maybe surprisingly not a very fearful person. I always grew up thinking I was a very fearful person. Like I'm immaturely fearful. Like I'm scared of the ocean. I don't like the darkness. I get scared on the New York City subway alone sometimes. But in terms of like life opportunity, I think I'm actually pretty ballsy. So I'm never in fear of like soul analysis is going to fail. If anything, I'm the one out of the 999 where I actually believe that our company's going to do well. Number one, but number two, even if it does fail, like I'm of your school of thought, and also like my parents, where my dad always said, or my mom, I think my mom always says this. She's like, if all else fails, like you'll become the best in and out manager in California and like be okay. Or like there's a Korean barbecue restaurant in front of my house, and some of their waiters make 6 figures just like through tips and stuff. Like I have no fear of my survivability. I think it's more of a day to day where I'm going to be very vulnerable for a second. Where, like, frankly, when you're at a 6 person startup or a 10 person startup, and especially if you're not a engineer, like the work that you do like isn't necessarily sexy. Like you're not like pushing some giant like product, or like you're not like doing some insane strategizing. A lot of the stuff is like grunt work. Like you're like figuratively bringing the coffee to the meeting, and like going through data and like cleaning stuff up, and also doing customer success stuff, and basically becoming a support channel facing your clients. And maybe that's unique to Web3, but I think from hearing from other people too, when you're at a smaller company with less structure, I think it's just always harder, because a lot of the times it feels like you're doing a million different things, but not necessarily accomplishing one single thing. You are building a company, but I think you could probably speak to the idea that, like, from professional services to now at a Fang, you do have ownership of like a single thing, or at least something that you can report to or have a KPI for. Whereas I think if you're in a smaller size company, or a startup, it's hard to feel accomplished sometimes, because you're not necessarily owning anything or getting reviewed for anything. Like your day flies by handling all these different things. And of course you're building towards a bigger mission. But I think that feedback channel and having structure to say, I'm going to become that person in 5 years, just doesn't exist. And that is a trickling down fear that I frankly face every day.
But I think that's the typical story. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
No.
that's the stage of a startup, in my opinion. You need to prove your services or product works. So there's a lot of emphasis and investment that goes into making the product fit for the market and the target segment that you go after. And then when it comes to like Series B and C, that's when you start thinking about scaling this product and marketing it, right? So if you're in a very early stage startup, of course, you as a non-product focused guy is not going to have a whole lot of attention to it, because like there's nothing really to go sell at this point or market it, because your product is not really polished up and fitting. But your role become more important as your company grows, because now the product is about 80% ready. You now need to go and sell that and make it work, and that's your go-to-market job. And that's kind of what I do, in a lot of most, and that's what I actually did in this strategy at McKinsey as well. So I would say, I think your fear is a little bit unwarranted, in a sense. All these things, I think, will feed to your management skills for an early startup, right? I think you've been busy taking care of fire, taking care of all these small things that are happening. But that's the skill set that I won't be able to have, because I'm already in a position where I can get data and visibility into the business, because people are already there doing that, right? But you don't have anyone that does that for you. So you are the one that is taking care of it. It's a different skill set, different scale. I think if you were to start another startup, it'll be better, because now you can anticipate all these little things that are going to crop up, and you can plan ahead and tackle that ahead of time. And who knows, like if your business takes off, you're going to get naturally more responsibilities, right? The mission becomes clearer in a way that it's not about making the product work anymore. It's more about, how do I deliver this product and support and scale the user base? And then you have to talk about sustainability, profitability, right? And then all that kind of stuff. So it's yet to come. And you might be feeling restless because you're not in the spotlight of things where
I'm not.
Yeah, but there's a phase transition,
Right.
In terms of, because if you talk to some of the software engineer people, there are people that just want to work for a startup because they're building something new and they want to be part of it and they love it. But then once the company grows and then you put a mature product out there, it's really hard to change that product upside down. It's going to be incremental changes to what customers want, and some features roll out, and automation. And some people won't get excited by that. Some people just want to create something new, something revolutionary, something that will hit the market hard. It's really hard to do. Like, for example, like any platforms that you see, even like Netflix, Google, Facebook, I don't see them turning upside down that platform anytime soon, right? No. It's not like, hey, search is gone tomorrow, here's search 2.0. Hey, Instagram platform is all erased. Now, you have to swipe like
to move this diagonally or whatever. Like it's just like that. Those things just don't change that fast.
You brought up exactly what I wanted to ask about now, and let's take the attention away from my insecurities here. We've seen last week was not a great week for Mr. Zuckerberg, and I know you and I talked about it a little bit, but and we can get into details later. But do you think big tech has hit maturation, like maturity, and there's no longer room for innovation, and it's now time for the next series of fangs to pop up? Or do you think that there's actually so much capital behind places like Meta and Apple and Google, where you think there's gonna be a new series of their products that are truly revolutionary? Because I think Facebook is trying to do that. They've obviously, their crypto branch or whatever got destroyed and now it's gone and they haven't done well. I think Apple's trying to, build cars or whatever. But do you think that we'll finally see revolution in the way that the Ford and the GMCs of the world couldn't back in the auto focus days?
If there is a market in the world where startups can become giants, like what happened to Google, Meta, even like Netflix, Amazon, it'll be the US. I feel like US is the market where small players could become big over 5, 10 year, 15-year horizon. In my opinion, like, has FANG reached maturity? I think it is. I mean, it is a mature company. You just look at the headcount and the revenue that bring in, it's just crazy. You can't say, $200 billion revenue generating company is still on a startup mode. That just doesn't work, right? It is mature, but I think what differentiates a lot of these tech companies from the old existing companies is that they are more flexible in terms of the areas that they want to influence. So tech by itself is a very broad terminology, right? And I think the area that they can go into, and the reason why I think Apple is going to things like cars, is that they see where they can take the customer experience and way of doing things to the next level. That's something, and that's what Apple has done with, I guess, like not just Apple, but like a lot of companies has done with like smartphones, right? Like it changed the way we think, the way we do things. And I think there's an electric vehicle is just a mode at which we go at, right? It's gas versus electric, and yes, it'll change how you charge your car and how you travel more eco-friendly. I get it, but I don't think Apple is going for something like electric vehicle per se. They're going for the next different customer experience, and I think that's what all the other FANG companies are trying to bring. All the topics of autonomous driving, quantum computing, even with like Web 3.0 from privacy perspective and decentralization. I think all of these things are going after a platform play where it will get a hold of the new life pattern of people around the world. Right? I think that's what's been proven for a lot of tech companies, that they own a platform one way or the other. Right? So I think they will continue to invest their cash into those areas, and I think that's what's happening. The other companies, I don't know. Like automotive companies definitely are on board on the whole EV train, but are they looking at owning some platform? I'm pretty sure they're thinking about it. But it's also just a matter of, again, like, what is the company really good at and delivering versus like, what are they actually capable of? And I don't have the facts behind it, but there are a lot of people who own Tesla in my friends group, right? They talk about, it's like good driving experience, quiet, I love it. They even use some autopilot features in the highway, which is great. But they do complain about the quality of the car sometimes, right? So like doors are misaligned a little bit, and then
like some of the seats are rough and they break down. But Tesla is not a car manufacturing company. They may have produced to like 99% level, but it's that finesse of the 1% in the car production. People are used to seeing, if you buy $100,000, $100K, car, and equivalent of 100K from, Ford and GMs or whatnot, you would expect flawless things. Like you go in, everything's impeccable. Whereas I don't think Tesla's kind of like that, right? It's like you're investing in the piece of technology that doesn't exist today, and then you have a good driving experience, which hits on all those, but it's not a car that has like the super finesse, like quality control to the dot and things like that. So I think it really depends on who you want to be. And if I look at Tesla, like I don't think they're an EV company, to be honest. They build electric vehicle, but there's a bigger and more ambitious agenda behind like the whole ecosystem around it, right? So they produce their own batteries. They can get easily into like home energy, right? And EV just could be a part of it. So I think to answer your question, these big tech companies, I think, is more prepared and more equipped than the older generation company to see and innovate and get ready for the future. And they're also in the driver's seat of changing that behavior, right? So, for example, like metaverse, for example, it's a cool idea, but I think the reason why they're pushing for that is they need to market this thing so that people come onto their platform so that it has a user base that they need. I'm pretty sure there's going to be other metaverses out there that companies will start creating, but it's all about that first or second mover, fast follower advantage of getting the people onto the platform, right? Like you have Uber and Lyft, it's the same story, DoorDash and Uber Eats. I think a lot of people can create the same platform, but whoever gets there first and market it and has that is going to have that advantage. And I think that's where, I think, in my opinion, Facebook is thinking. But yeah, let's see. Like, I think I'm still hopeful for a lot of these existing industrial giants, right? Whether it's car manufacturers or pharmaceutical companies, or if they manage their business well, I think they can prepare and re-gear themselves for what's coming in the future. And I do believe, it doesn't come top of my mind, but I do believe there are companies who have done well with the rise of the tech companies and who have actually not done well. So I think GE is one of those companies where they divested a lot and kind of, company that kind of fell out of the glory in the last 10 years. But if you look at companies like NVIDIA, for example, right? They've done amazingly well in the last 10 years. And then all the car manufacturers are, I think, starting to come back. Let's see how long this e-commerce wave also rides. Right. E-commerce is not becoming the norm. It's no longer disruptive in a sense. It's kind of people expect every retailers to have an e-commerce channel. So they're looking for what's new. The payment space is already being disrupted from the fintechs. So let's see.
Speaking of looking for what's new, actually, I think we've been talking for an hour, so we could close off soon. But there's not many people on my channel that has your level of experience and your level of just years under you. At this point in your career, in my personal opinion, you could probably just cruise and stay where you're at and live a perfectly fine life and be happy. But do you still feel, because throughout the podcast you just talked about, there's things I still want to do and I might go back to this. Do you still feel ambitious, or has the ambition changed? Is it different from the feeling of ambition you had when you entered McKinsey versus when you first entered Google or when you were doing a Ph.D.? And ideally, where would you take your career starting now? Like, what would you do? Because how farther up could you get?
I think I have different viewpoint from you. So you're talking about how far up you can get. I think for me is what's my interest and what do I want to just pursue next, right? It's I don't see my career as going up. I actually see my career as a flat, and then there are options where path I can take. And I choose to study in one area, but then unfortunately had to find a job in another area. But then I found success and interest there. And I leveraged that skill set to go into where I'm at now. And if I think about next is I can continue to do this, right? And then and stay and continue to hone this skill and live that life. Or if I feel like, hey, I really want to, there's an interest in space. Like, for example, like I'm actually quite interested in healthcare space. And if I want to go explore that, why don't I just go work for a healthcare company or do a startup in a healthcare company? Or I always wanted to own restaurants for whatever reason. So maybe I should just go and own a restaurant or something. So it's more of exploring what's out there and not really, of course, like financial freedom, financial security, is on my mind. I wouldn't say like, I would lie if that's not on my mind, but I kind of feel I'm still young enough, right? And I still have probably 20, 25 years under my belt to work.
Sure.
And the last thing that I want to do is, when I'm 60 and say, oh, I should have tried and explored that stuff, field. It's not really a FOMO in a sense, but I think there are areas that I still want to explore in my career, right? And I definitely wanted to explore this whole tech space, and I'm loving the job that I do right now. But can I guarantee that I'll be here 10 years from now? Like, no, I can't, because knowing my life pattern, I think it changes every 3 to 5 years. And I love San Francisco right now. Would I still be here in the next 5 years? I can't guarantee, right? Knowing my pattern, I might be in a different city 5 years from now. So for me, it's endless just exploration and adventure. But then I will make the next stop based on like what my interest and what my strengths are. I just need to bring that all together. I can't blindly jump into a world like you. I can't just go and say like, oh, I'm just going to do NFT. Okay, quit my job. Like I'm not going to do that. But if there is a startup that aligns with my interest and they value my skill set and it challenges me to do something new and what I can learn from, I would entertain those options for sure.
Then actually, final question. Do you think, and this is more for the audience, when you're hiring, when you're in the hiring seat, I think this is juxtaposes everything we talked about. Do you look for candidates that exhibit qualities that you exhibit, like the exploratory or are you looking more for the, not saying you're not a hard worker, but you're looking more for the career Googler or the career McKinseyer?
Regardless of the hiring practices, there are certain traits that I look for for my team members.
Yes.
And I think one important thing that I just look for is that person's level of enthusiasm and just ability and willingness to learn. And also not shy of communicating the opinions. I maintain very casual, open relationship with my team members. It's also just to foster like psych safety, inclusion, diversity, which I value a whole lot, by the way. But the only way you're gonna have that team is listen a lot, right, as a manager, and then also remind them that their opinions are valued. But for someone to have an opinion, they also need to be able to learn and also get coached,
Mm.
and also put in the effort to do whatever you're good at, right? Because the opinions don't form naturally. You need to know certain thing about what you're doing, what the business is doing. You need to learn about what's actually happening around you to have an opinion. And so that's what I think, regardless of whether you have technical skill set or smart or not, you have
Sure.
intrinsics or not, I think it's that will that I'm looking for. So you have the will and the skill matrix that people talk about.
Mm.
I actually feel like the will is really, really important. You could be really, really smart. So I could be really, really smart. Or I could be really, really physically gifted. But do I have the will to push myself and become, let's say, like the best baseball player in the world? I have the skill, but if I don't have the will, I'm not going to put in the time. So the next best skilled player who puts in the time obviously is going to be better than me.
Mm.
And I think it's the same analogy for a lot of things. Is your skill does matter, but there are always going to be the element of the effort that you put in that's going to push you to the better, person. And then the environment that we live in today, things are constantly changing. So if you don't invest in yourself or trying to learn new things and get caught up, you are actually going to fall behind, right? So that's something that I look for, is this person motivated in the stuff that he or she is doing? Is this person willing to learn and also communicate how he or she is progressing? So these are not like hardcore technical skill set. It's more of the mindset.
And how do you decipher those things? Like, what do you look for? How would you tell on the hiring seat?
I mean, I can't tell you all the details of it because I do hire people. But I think it just shows when you talk about like your past experiences, what have you contributed, how you interact with other people, how do you like set goals and target for yourself and things like that. I think it naturally just shows whether you're enthusiastic about learning in the new area or have you put some thought into it, right? Another thing is you don't have to appeal to everybody right away. That's one thing that I learned is like, for example, if I had to do my job search again in college, I would have been more targeted because I was panicking after my PhD. It's like, hey, like I can't go to the aerospace industry. What do I do? So I took a shotgun approach, right? And luckily I landed McKinsey, but I literally applied to almost all jobs out there. And I tweaked my resume to all those jobs. It's probably the wrong approach. Right? You should just sit down and think about like, what are you good at and what are you actually most passionate about? And where's the one or two areas that where you really want to develop and take your career in the next 3 to 5 years? And then you would have just one resume and one story, and you would market that. And there will be a company out there that will value your skill set, and that's a match. Right? That's all you need, right? At the end of the day, you can apply for 10,000 jobs, but you're only going to get one job.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter if you get 10,000 offers or one offer. You only need one offer from a company that values you and you also like to work with them. And that was the mindset that I had when I left McKinsey, and it worked, right? I want to do something in strategy and operations. I want to do something that I am decently good at. I wanted to do work for more of leading edge tech company than some of the laggards. And I wanted to be in the West Coast. And so those are kind of like my criteria. And yeah, there were several companies that met those and it worked out. And so if I took my college approach, I probably would have applied to like 50 to 100 jobs, right? And with McKinsey on my resume, I probably would have gotten at least first round interviews.
Oh yeah.
But I actually applied to like maybe 9 jobs. And then I got like 4 or 5 offers.
Sure.
And that was already enough for me to like really decide and negotiate. And so I think it'll be hard for me if I apply for, let's say, 50 jobs and I got like 20 offers. It'll be a nightmare because now I have so many options. You know, I'm back to square one. It's like what I want to do in life. And, you know, how does this company fit into my thing? So just be wary of like job search and your next step in career. Like first starts with you, right? It's not like, don't take the job that other people offers you because it sounds cool. Like
Right.
you first needs to be aligned with where you want to be and where you want to take it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, thanks for joining. I actually, as we finish, is there anything? It doesn't have to be job related. Actually, just in general, you spewed a lot of wisdom, but I do have quite a bit of people that watch this channel. I think just for guidance, because a lot of them feel lost about their careers, and frankly, a lot of the people that I speak to on my one-on-ones are very accomplished. Like they all go to better schools than I've come from, and they have cooler careers sometimes, but they seem lost. As someone who's been there and done that, what is your sign off message?
You don't think I'm lost? I'm not lost. I may not have everything nailed down.
And maybe that's the message.
I mean, the biggest life lesson that I've got with my unique background is it's always good to plan something, but it's always, you plan for something. It could be anything, but don't feel let down if it doesn't go by your plan, right? So what that means is that I always like to have control of where I'm going at least 6 months to a year out. Right? Just plant it in your head, like where I want to be, and keep evaluating on a weekly basis. Like, am I happy? Like, is this what I want to do? And if it's not, then you should start making some changes to your plan. But then, because I moved around so much, and then some of them were just not in my control, I've also learned that these plans change, and it may just shatter all your dreams and all that. So, for example, maybe relating to your listener base is, let's say you wanted to take your current career, work hard for the next year or so, get promoted, get to here, and then maybe your exit option opens up to blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
There could be many things that happens over the next 6 to 12 months, right? So my life example was when I was in McKinsey, the COVID hit, right? So my entire portfolio of clients and my trajectory just got derailed. What that means is that, hey, I was actually, go out for a partner later in the year, and I had all this stuff. That's all gone, wiped out. And it's easy to panic and then start blaming for the situation, right? And everyone will do that. It's like, hey, it's outside my control. This is shit. Like, I got really unlucky, blah, blah, blah. But I think important life lesson for me is that, yes, those things do happen, and it will also happen more in your lifetime. I think it's just more about taking that all in, sit down, and then replan and just orient your life into something. I think that composure, that mentality is something that I want to, tell people, is that there will be a lot of times where things don't go as planned, but maybe take those setbacks as an opportunity to reevaluate, and something good actually may come out of it. And for me, I'm actually very thankful for like what happened in 2020, like professional career-wise, because I mean, don't get me wrong, COVID is terrible. Like,
Sure.
But like what COVID enabled me career-wise was, if COVID didn't happen, I think I would have had a great path at McKinsey, and
Right.
I would probably still be at McKinsey at this point. But I was actually not very happy in my last years of McKinsey, because it's something that a lot of things that I was doing was no longer in my interest. And I don't know if I want to be a career consultant for that matter. So that thought process was already living in my head. And then COVID hit and derailed my program completely. And it gave me an opportunity to pause and say, okay, maybe this is an opportunity for me to look for other things and make changes to my life. And so 2020 was like
I took a break from work for 6 to 8 months. And then the first 6 months actually was spent not on job searching. The first 6 months of the break was me just reevaluating a lot of things, like writing things down, like what I want in life and how has like my last 6 years has been. Where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? What kind of line of work do I want to do? How do I like increase my happiness? All those, a lot of like philosophical and questions that I never even had a time to think about. And then I went on job search in November and December, and then interviewed, and then I started at Google in 2021. But that process, I think, was very satisfying. I also feel like it was a very necessary and also very timely event that happened to me like in my early/mid 30s. And it also just reminded me that it was a good thing probably that happened, because to your point, I was a little bit skeptical whether I should leave consulting even after that event, because I'm like making a good living. I mean, I didn't like the job as much as I did before, but I can still like plow through it, right? And but you know, I never thought that I could just take a pause, quit, and find something better for myself. I needed an external nudge. I think that's a life lesson for me. Is that I should not be needing that external nudge all the time in my future events for me to reevaluate where I want to be and get fair share of my value in the market. Right? So if you feel stuck right now, maybe it's a good time for you and others just to take the weekend time off and just really think about like what's actually driving you and what do you actually want to do, and make sure that you don't compare yourself with other people. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that I don't really compare. You talk about your career as going up.
Sure.
For me, it's not going up. It's like for you, it's like exploring. Right? There's so many. You won't be able to explore everything in life, and I think it's just prioritizing where you want to spend your time. And I'm a firm believer that if you have the will and if you focus your area on things that you like and you are decently good at, all the money and everything will follow. Right? Because if you look at the top professions, they're not on the streets or homeless. Right? No. Even like a great plumber, right, in San Francisco will be making more money than I am because he probably owns a plumbing business, right? And so that's what I'm saying. It's like it's optimized for something different. Like, I think for me, when I started at McKinsey at 30, I was eager to learn and perform because it was my first job. And I did have that pressure. I'm 30, I'm starting my first job. All my friends started their first job in 23, 24, and they're already like so successful in their career. But that mindset changed very quickly after 1 or 2 years working at McKinsey, knowing that it's not really about the rat race. It's not really about how am I progressing upwards in my career. Because at that point, I saw some of my friends who were successful, but then, you know, not having such great personal life for that moment, right? I've also seen some people who made a lot of money, retired, but then now they're coming back to work because they are bored. So I think it really just depends on what you optimize for. You can slave away your 20s and 30s making all that cash, and then you may have a dream to retire at age 30, 35, or 40. But have you actually thought about or talked to people who retired at the age and see what they do? Is that just something that you want? Maybe it's not. Right? So that's what I mean. Everything that you plan is great, but your plan will change over time. Just gotta keep on reevaluating, and most importantly, don't measure yourself against others. It's, at the end of the day, you only have to answer to yourself whether you're really happy with where you are.
Yeah. Well,
Are you happy where you are, Brian?
I was scared where you were to ask that. You know what? I'm on the daily realizing this is gonna sound really weird, and I hope I say this right. I am probably objectively a lot more happier than I tell myself and others I am.
Hmm.
Which obviously you would rather have it that way than the reverse, but and maybe that's a paradox because you what you tell yourself slash how you feel is the real thing. But I think I have a great life. I really like what I do, and if I take a pause and really think about how is my life, I've rarely thought this sucks. If anything, at most times, especially nowadays, like my life is awesome. I think that I tend to be a relatively critical person on myself, and that's probably somewhat how I've gone this far. But that causes me to sometimes be very negative on like this could be better. And to your point, I think I'm someone that compares a lot, not necessarily against others per se, but more of like something that I project on myself and thinking I could have been a certain way, but I'm this way now. So I'm comparing myself to a different universe me. But I think a shorter answer to your question is I think I am more than happy. And I'm not someone that is I'm ambitious, but I'm also relatively easily satisfied. Like I always tell my friends, like um, my happiest moments are like conversations like this, or eating like dollar pizza with my friends at late night. Like none of the things that I think require insane success or ambition are actually things that make me happy. And frankly, I achieved relatively decent success at a very young age, and I made more money than most 21-year-olds could dream of at 21. And there were very few moments during those times where I was truly happy. Whereas now, I think I have the chance to make a lot of money, but I wouldn't say on the daily I'm making more money than I did in banking, like holistically. But right now, I'm more than happy pursuing something that's exciting for me and contributing in a cause that I think I actually have a bigger impact on, and like living a pretty cool life in a cool industry. And I think moving forward and lately, so that's something I've been really trying to focus on is your point exactly of like, yes, you should have a plan and you would ideally want that plan to work out, but knowing that Brian Jun today is very different, gonna be very different from Brian Jun 6 months from now. Honing in on that and realizing it's far more important for me to be enjoying today as a figurative thing rather than like is what I'm doing now going to contribute to my 6 month goal? Because if I solely evaluate me today, I can say I'm the happiest person alive. Like I had a great night with my friends last night yesterday. I woke up in a great New York City apartment that most people would love to be in. I have a great family. I have a fantastic job and organization to go to tomorrow. I have plans later after this. I'm recording a cool YouTube video for a side hobby that generates me money with a older brother figure that I respect. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong about today that impedes on even my week long or 6 month plan. Am I worried that like the NFT world might, go away or I might become obsolete? Sure. But I think I'm realizing that might not be my goal in a year. What if in a year I want to go become a missionary, or what if I want to become a cult leader, or what if I want to drop everything and start writing a book? At that point, I'm not going to look back at this time and say I should have done something else. I led to that because of what I did now. So I think it's a lot more healthier and practical. I wouldn't even say it's idealistic. I would say it's practical to focus on today because frankly, my day to day is very happy.
I think you become the next Asian Conan O'Brien. Your own like big talk show.
That would be the dream. That would be the dream.
You should explore. No, I love the fact that you have a lot of stuff going on, like different. That's what I mean. Like if I think you're, I don't think you're. I think you're viewing the career as a flat surface too. Like you, just hearing your talk, you're doing a lot of things on the side, right? You're exploring things, and I think that's the right way to think about it, right? And if NFT takes off, great for you. But
Sure.
I feel like you're already kind of mentally prepared that this may not take off, but I actually have other things in life that keeps me occupied and happy and open doors for me.
Right.
I think that's really good. I don't think a lot of people do that. A lot of people get very pigeonholed after their college into one job, and then they think about, okay, after this job, then where do I go next? It's very serial,
Right.
and there's not enough that parallel view that you actually adopted today.
Well, yeah, and thank you for hopping on. We should probably both return to our Sundays. I think you should start something. I've been telling you to start something, and you've been saying you're going to start something. But I think at least start a blog. It's very minimal effort. You have so much about. I think you'd be surprised how much people care about things that the person themselves might think like, why would anyone listen to that or read about that?
Hmm. Well, let me know how this podcast goes. Maybe you can show me some facts and data. It'll trigger my will to.
Dude, I don't know.
report something.
My channel's been on a decline. I've been doing so much of like what I actually want to do versus like what draws in views that I think my audience is not very happy. But what you know what? It is what it is.
Keep at it. You
I
don't have
will.
to satisfy everyone.
I
That's
know.
all I'm keep saying.
All right. Yeah, and thank you so much. I hope you see you. I'll see you.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.